The biggest story in the news continues to be Russian meddling in the US election. And since I'm new to YouTube, I think it's a good time for me to give my take on this big story because it's not going away. It doesn't appear to be going away at all. There's so far, just so we're all clear, there is no direct evidence that the Russian government worked with the Trump campaign to get him elected. And when I say this, I mean there's no evidence that the Russians hacked into the DNC or John Podesta. There is no evidence of this that has been provided to the public or that anybody knows of. There's also no evidence that any votes were manipulated by the Russians and changed to Donald Trump. That information has also never been uncovered. So even though the story persists, we have to be fair and call it what it is. The Russian meddling story is, as it stands, a conspiracy theory. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there should be a thorough investigation into this, and there is. And hopefully we can trust that process. But until we actually have hard facts, calling this anything other than a conspiracy theory is irresponsible, in my opinion. So let's just get to the facts. Even if it is true that the Russians did hack the DNC, which, as I said, there's no evidence. But if it is true, the evidence that surfaced from that only incriminates the Democrats and the Clinton campaign in that they were skewed against Bernie Sanders, that they actively worked against Bernie Sanders, against the charter of the DNC. And there is a lawsuit charging the Democratic National Committee with fraud that's being undertaken by Jared and Elizabeth Beck. They have some security concerns because according to them, they have two potential witnesses who are no longer walking the face of the earth. So they've also received some threats that have been posted, one of which actually came from W. Wasserman Schultz's office. But I digress. Just to say that the information coming from WikiLeaks only incriminates the Clinton campaign and the DNC in that they were unfair to Bernie Sanders during the primary. Now, let's also take this from WikiLeaks, right? Because the New York Times at one point says 17 U.S. agencies say that this was a hack. And now they actually retracted that with no news coverage whatsoever. But now it's 4 agencies say that this was the result of a hack and not a leak. So let's take a look. WikiLeaks is saying this is a leak, and they are probably the most credible news organization we have remaining. They have never been proven to have shared any false information. And in fact, all of this information that came out from these leaks, none of it has been denied as being false. Now, Donna Brazil at one point tried to say it was false, but she then walked back those comments. So the information that came out from WikiLeaks, let's just remember, is true and is a benefit to us as voters. Now, we would have never known Hillary Clinton thought it was very important to hold both a private and public position. But I think as a voter, that's information that we should know. And I am grateful to WikiLeaks for letting us know exactly how corrupt both political parties are. Well, of course, that is the attack on WikiLeaks, is that they didn't release anything on the Republicans. However, you'd have to be a fucking moron not to realize that Donald Trump was a con man. So what came out is that Hillary Clinton is also a con artist and a criminal. At least that's what a lot of evidence points to in terms of the way they ran their foundation with pay for play politics involved. Donations coming in, favors going out. We see that they were writing stories. The Clinton campaign was actually writing stories for mainstream media outlets. There's one guy who was embarrassed as he stated, or as he agreed to do it. So you can't even trust the news coming from them because it's being directly written from the campaigns. So this information came to light, and that's great for the public. So if Russia gave that to us, honestly, objectively, we should really be grateful to Russia for doing that. Now, here's the other thing. Let's just all agree Russian meddling is the biggest story in the news, and we really should be focusing on it. I'm not going to disagree with that, because I will say this. If we're concerned that U.S. voting machines can be hacked into, something should be done about that. And it was proven before the election that this is definitely possible, that these voting systems are vulnerable, and that the integrity of our voting system is in question. So if the Democrats are going to make this their big issue, I think it would be wise of them to come up with a plan, solution, policy proposal to modernize, update, upgrade our voting system to prevent this from happening in the future. But instead, there are no proposals. There are no politicians out here with any solutions as how to fix this problem with an unsecure voting system. So this is going to be the big issue. Please help us solve it. It's not enough to make light of it for 8 months. Let's actively work on a solution, especially if you're going to ignore all the major issues going on in our country and all the real things that Trump is doing that the American people don't like rushing 2 pipelines through, bombing Syria, not a popular choice. Now, before I digress too far, there's one more angle of this I want to take. If we can all agree that cybersecurity is a major issue, then were we right to disregard Hillary Clinton's use of a private unsecured server for 3 months? If we know that other countries are trying to hack into U.S. systems, then clearly having classified information on a BlackBerry is a reckless and criminal act. So it's, to me, the Democrats not understanding how these two stories are connected. It's really hard for me to understand why. How can we say Russian hackers are I guess the most powerful thing in the world, since they just swayed our election, if you're to believe the narrative. But however, don't be concerned that there's classified information on an unsecured server that, by the way, is being shared with data companies that are backing up this information. All of this completely against the law, but it was disregarded. Even in the public, we go, oh, don't talk about the emails, especially now. It's July 2017, and here I am talking about Clinton's emails. I don't think the story is going away. I think the investigation might actually be reopened into this. I have heard some talk of that. So anyway, to me, it's not just the investigation, it's the perception of the American people. We can't just give Hillary Clinton a free pass out of one side of our mouth, and then on the other side of our mouth say hacking is the biggest issue currently in the world. So to me, there's some huge cognitive dissonance there. Hacking is a problem. It's a big deal. I think one other point I wanted to slip in here is that finding out the source of a hack is not nearly as easy as they're making it out to be. Now, just so we go over the facts, the DNC never sent their servers to the FBI so that they can investigate how these hacks went down. Instead, a private company called CrowdStrike did the data analysis, came up with the conclusion that according to them, these looked like the same tools used by Russian hackers. Now, that prompted the statement to be released that 17, which is now 4 U.S. agencies, agree that the Russians hacked. They were all citing CrowdStrike, a private company, their analysis. Now, when we have an organization like the NSA, I would defer to them. And if they don't have conclusive information, chances are nobody does. So that's my take. Russian meddling. Still a big story, not going away, but definitely this story needs more perspective, and that hasn't been offered in the last 8 months.